I want to talk to you about a test or a device or a method that you can use to check on your decision making. This is a technique that I wrote about earlier this year in Directors and Boards for purposes of boards of directors being able to test the decision making of their private company CEOs. It comes from the public markets, but it's really effective with the private sector as well, private companies that are operating in a little bit different context and make decisions in a different way. And it draws from short sellers, which are sharks in the water. They're feared, they're hated, they're despised because they're doing something which is highly unpleasant. But what do short sellers do? One of which is they look for material weakness in companies, A. B, they're looking to see what's the size of the bet. How big is the failure? How big is the payoff if the stock crashes? Third, they're looking for a trigger point in the marketplace where that stock price is going to shift. So trigger points is an important concept. We'll talk about them in a subsequent episode, how they behave and what that means for you and your company and how to look for them. And then fourthly, they go to Twitter or X or the media and publicize what they found because they're trying to provoke the crash in the stock price associated with it. Here's the reality. Short sellers don't cause companies to fail. They're not liked, but it's not the short seller that causes it. It's instead a mistaken judgment by the CEO, the senior leadership, the boards of directors. It happened, for example, in the 2008 financial crisis, as made famous by The Big Short, the film that was originally penned by Michael Lewis about the failure of AIG and other major financial institutions and short sellers harvesting tremendous profits because of a bet against the subprime housing market. It happened again more recently, earlier this year, with Silicon Valley Bank, which was a high flyer, had 3-year just phenomenal growth rate, phenomenal returns for the investors, had developed their decision-making to replicate a pattern, a cycle. It was extremely lucrative for everybody, really became part of the ego and identity of the executive team. And so they want to make that bet and make sure it continues as long as possible. They were targeted by a short seller named William Martin, who then provoked the exposure, although all the information was in the existing balance sheets of the company. So he's using public information. Private companies don't have that same sort of scrutiny, transparency, but it's a technique that you can use as the CEO of your own company, or if you're a board chairman or a board of directors, in order to assess the decisions. Here's the wrinkle. This is really important. The mistaken judgment does not happen within a 90 or 120 days before this point or after this point. Instead, the mistaken judgment is planted 2 to 3 years ago. The seeds are planted 2 to 3 years before the short seller goes to work. And the reason is because they anchor into the decision making. The executive decision makers become locked into their positions. They become immobile. And then there's a shift in the situational context. Something happens within 2 to 3 years, which shifts the situational context, which is going to reframe the decision. And instead of being highly successful, is going to make you extraordinarily vulnerable, which is what happened in both the cases of AIG and Silicon Valley Bank. You had a change in the overall market conditions, which then they were paralyzed and stuck and vulnerable and subsequently attacked, and both failed. We can use that same sort of technique in any private company to look at what are the decisions that we're making today. If material changes in that situational context shift over the next 2 to 3 years, what happens? How are we exposed? What vulnerabilities are created? Really effective technique to use. That's it for now. Go ahead and use this in your own deliberations and decision making, and I'll talk to you soon.